Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're back in P3D V5 and we'll be taking the Just Flight BAC 111 on a trip from London Gatwick down to Lisbon in Portugal. The aircraft that you can see in front of you is a British Caledonian BAC 111-300, and in today's video we'll be using the aircraft to recreate an historic British Caledonian route, as I mentioned, from London Gatwick down to Lisbon. Today's flight will be carried out using only conventional navigational methods. That is to say that we'll only be using radio navigation aids for navigation throughout the flight. So we'll be departing out of London Gatwick, initially heading towards the Southampton VOR. We'll then head over the Channel Islands, on towards the northwestern coast of France, passing over the Bay of Biscay, over the northern coast of Spain, crossing the Cantabrian mountain range, and finally heading south through Portugal on towards Lisbon. As always guys, I do hope you enjoyed the video, but for now, thanks very much. Let's jump into the cockpit and begin the flight. So good morning and welcome to the flight deck of the BAC 111. We've been given our clearance down to Lisbon this morning. We'll be flying the Southampton to Victor departure off runway 26 left and climbing initially to an altitude of 6,000 feet, and we're squawking 5353. We've also been given our clearance for the push and start, so we'll carry out the before start checklist below the line. Fuel on board we have 10.5 tonnes, which is what we planned for the flight today. Parking brake is on. Air isolation valves are open. Air conditioning masters closed. Ram air is normal. Safety pressure valve is open. Engine generator controls are both tripped. Start clearance has been obtained. The beacon is on. Engine top temperatures are on. And the throttles are closed. So we are now ready for the push and start. Park brake can come off. We'll begin the push back. And now that we're moving, we can begin the engine start. So the first thing we do, move the HP fuel lever to start. Start master can go to start, and we'll start engine 1. Keeping an eye on the igniters, as soon as we see the lights out, we'll disengage the engine starter, and monitoring the run up on the engine gauges. Okay, lights out, releasing the starter, continue to monitor the run up, and keeping an eye on the pushback as well. So we can stop the pushback here. Aircraft is stationary, park brake on. Looks like we've had a good run up on engine 1, so the HP lever can go to open. And the same for number 2, so HP lever to start. Engine 2 start. And lights out, releasing the starter. And looks like we've had a good run up on number 2, so again the HP lever to open. Start master can go off. Engine generators can come on. And the flight's more than 1 hour, so we'll turn the APU off. The after start checklist, bus and generator fail lights are out. Air conditioning masters open. Anti-ice not required, control surfaces. Are checked, and we are now ready for the taxi.
Gatwick ground, Caledonian 601 with information, India, request taxi, IFR. Caledonian 601, taxi, hold, wait for runway 06 left, taxiway 5, contact advised, 1 ready. Taxi, hold short runway 26 left via taxiway, Mike, Caledonian 601.
So we cleared the taxiway, Mike. That's a nice easy taxi for us. All we need to do is basically swing the aircraft around 180 degrees and we'll be straight on to Mike. So you'll see that the aircraft does need an awful lot of thrust to get us moving. Obviously pretty unrealistic there. And as it's a very short taxi down to Mike, in fact you can see Mike now just off at our 3 o'clock, we'll just taxi to the holding point and then we'll continue the before takeoff checklist. Pretty quiet at the holding point at the moment, so hopefully, unless there's any landing traffic, we should be off pretty quickly.
India, classic taxi, IFR. 14 heavy, taxi holding point for runway 06 left via taxiway Kilo, November, Alpha, contact tower on 1
Sounds like we have one other aircraft on the way. Now it's this holding point Mike. So bring the aircraft to a stop, part brake on, before takeoff checklist, hydraulic pumps, so we'll turn auxiliary 2 off. Door warning lights are all out. Parking brake is on. Flaps and slats. So we want flaps 18 for the takeoff today. Now flaps 18 we have set. Battery is on. Speed brakes are stowed. Trims set for takeoff. Takeoff speeds. Just set V1. V1130, VR140, V2145, and we'll be climbing at V2 plus 20 initially, with a initial flap cleanup speed of 180 knots. Flight instruments, so we have runway heading on the heading bug, the 244 radial inbound to Midhurst. We'll take the flight directive for heading, and the altimeter is set. Reversers are stowed, lights are out. Flaps are set for the takeoff. Landing lights, we'll turn those on now then. Pitot heaters can come on. The side window and window heating on. Anti-ice not required. Autopilot is off. Transponder is set. Cabin pressurization is set. Start switches are set to relight. Water injection is not modelled, not required. Engine top temperatures are on, and the takeoff clearance we can now obtain. So switching over to tower.
Gatwick Tower, Caledonian 601 at runway 26 left, ready for departure, IFR to Lisbon. Caledonian 601, clear for takeoff, runway 26 left, surface wind 90 at 7. Clear for takeoff, runway 26 left, Caledonian 601.
So it's clear on final. Pretty nice clear day here in London. A little bit of cloud on the departure, so we might have to turn the engine anti-ice on. So initially departing on runway heading 259, and then we'll intercept the 244 radial inbound to Midhurst, climbing to an altitude of 6,000 feet. We'll use 95% power for the takeoff, and let's go. So thrust is set. That's 100 knots. V1. Rotate. So coming back on the stick, the aircraft very heavy in pitch. And we're up. There's positive climb, gear up. And climbing away around 165 knots initially.
Caledonian 601, contact Gatwick departure equals 118.95. 118.95, Caledonian 601. Gatwick departure, Caledonian 601 is climbing through 1,700 for altitude 6,000. Caledonian 601, Gatwick departure, roger, QNH 1009er. Caledonian 601, turn left heading 250, resume on navigation, climb altitude 6,000. Turn left heading 250, proceed on course, climb altitude 6,000. Caledonian 601.
So climbing to 6,000 feet, we can start retracting the flaps for above 180 knots. And coming left onto a heading of 250. Through 200 knots, flaps up. And we'll come back slightly on the power now for the climb. Pitching back up to 250 knots. And we're through 3,000 feet now, so we'll take the autopilot. So there's heading, autopilot on. And we'll go for about 3,000 feet a minute initially. Set our speed bug for 250 knots. And just coming up on 1 to go. So coming back off the power, just coming up on our radial as well now. Hopefully we'll get another climb from air traffic control shortly. And about 9 miles to run to Midhurst. Once we've turned outbound from Midhurst, we'll run the after takeoff checklists.
Climb and maintain altitude 12,000. Climb and maintain altitude 12,000. Caledonian 601.
Okay, great, so we'll come back up on the power. Up to 12,000 feet. And still just drifting slightly to the right to the radial there. Getting pretty close to the station now, so we won't chase it too much. After takeoff checklist, gear is up, lights are out, flaps are up, APU is off, start switches off, landing lights can come off.
Caledonian 601, contact London Control on 118.475. Contact London Control on 118.475. Caledonian 601, thanks for the help, bye. London Control, Caledonian 601 is at altitude 90,000, climbing altitude 12,000. Seabird 65 heavy, climb by level 330. Seabird 725, you are 53 miles south, turn right, heading 025, climb and maintain flight level 300, expect vectors visual, runway 27, right, approach, Caledonian 601, London Control, roger, QNH 1008.
So 1008 set, so APU is off, air conditioning masters are open, altimeters are set, Hydraulics, the auxiliary 1 pump can go off now, and the fuel transfer pumps can go on. So we'll start feeding from the centre tank. So just passing over Midhurst now, we'll come back onto heading of 259. And we can set 259 on the radial. And we can switch over to Southampton. So there's Southampton, 27 miles to run inbound.
Caledonian 601, climb light level 180. Climb light level 180, Caledonian 601.
Okay, so climbing all the way up to flight level 180 now. Unfortunately I can't figure out how to orally identify the nav aids on this aircraft. I have tried the radio management panel. Didn't seem to be getting anything there. We're through 10,000 feet now, so we can start accelerating up to 300 knots.
Turn right heading 280, proceed on course, descend and maintain altitude 12,000, orbit line 385.
And we're just now continuing the climb all the way up to flight level 180. As we're climbing up to a flight level now, we can set our altimeter. There's 2992. We might encounter a little bit of a bug later on where it doesn't acknowledge that we're at flight level 180, so we might have to climb just past that before we get further climb from air traffic control. And you can see we are now feeding from the centre tank. We've already burned through 500 kilograms of fuel. Pretty heavy fuel burn on this aircraft at low altitude. See, we're burning about 3 tons an hour currently. Speed's coming up nicely. And we're clear of all the weather, so we'll turn these seatbelt signs off. We have an ice warning, but we'll disregard that. We're clear of any cloud at the moment, so there's no moisture around. The outside air temperature is just coming down to 0 degrees Celsius. Coming up on 300 knots now. Now we're nicely on the radial inbound to Southampton. We'll get our next VOR tuned up. So the next VOR we're looking for is Quebec Papa Romeo, that is 117.8. However, that's a long way off at the moment, that's over northern France. We'll tune that on nav 2 now, however. Slightly fiddly click spots here. So there's 117.8. And in fact you can see we're already picking that up. However, we're more than 100 miles away at the moment, nearly 200 miles away in fact. And we won't switch over until we're roughly halfway between Southampton and Quebec Papa Romeo. So again, closing in on the station now, just coming slightly back to the left of track to come back onto the radial. But again, we won't chase it around too much this close to the station.
Contact 4 must approach,
Just one to go. So keeping an eye on the speed, we might just have to come back on the thrust slightly. And again, we'll climb above flight level 180 if we don't get a climb from air traffic control, just due to the bug that I encountered earlier. Next heading we'll be looking for is 219, after we pass overhead the station. So as you can see, air traffic control not giving us another climb here, but there we go.
Climb light level 320. Climb light level 320, Caledonian 601.
So 320 now. So there'll be a course of 214.
90,100, climbing altitude 15,000. Orbit 90292, London, control Roger, QNH1008.
4 miles to run now to Southampton. And again, we are slightly to the right of the station, but we are close to the station now, so not unusual to see a large deviation. There we go, passing overhead the station now. So turning on to our heading of 219.
Climb and maintain flight level 28048 heavy.
And we can set our course now of 214.
Wind Armor 8705, turn left, heading 170, descend flight level 360.
Quite a strong wind today, up at altitude around 71 knots, coming from the southwest. So it's going to have a tendency to blow us to the left of track.
Beaver 2157 heavy, climb and maintain flight level 360. Climb and maintain flight level 360, Beaver 2157 heavy.
And we'll just come up slightly on the power now. The RPM starting to fall off there. Want to climb with around 95%. And we're going to have to ease off on the climb as well. The speed slowly starting to come back there. You are 30 miles west, turn left, heading 07 miles, climb and maintain flight level 180, expect vectors visual, runway 26. In fact, we'll just come slightly right on the heading again just to get back on track.
2957, turn left, heading 07 miles, descend altitude 5,000.
We're 10 miles from the station now, so we won't be chasing it around too much.
075, descend and maintain altitude 5,000, expect vectors visual, runway 26, left approach, speed bird 2957. Turn right, heading 080, descend and maintain flight level 330, expect vectors visual.
So all that's left for us to do now is slowly make our way up to cruising flight level, which today will be flight level 320. Not much more for you guys to see, so we'll jump outside, have a look at the scenery on the way through northern France, on our way down to Lisbon, and then we'll come back just before the Fatima VOR for the top descent into Lisbon.
Turn left, heading 135, resume on navigation.
to the flight deck. We're now tracking inbound to the Fatima VOR, currently talking to Lisbon. We have about 40 miles to run, correction 50 miles to run to the Fatima VOR, so expecting a descent clearance shortly. The aircraft's pretty much set up for the approach already, there's not a whole lot we need to do there really. Anticipating the arrival for the ILS-21. Initially flying the star and then expecting radar vectors for the ILS at some point later on. For the star itself, it's pretty straightforward. You just track outbound of the Fatima VOR to the Aruda NDB, which we have set on NDB2, and then we track towards the Lima Oscar NDB, which we have on number 1. Again, they're expecting radar vectors at some point before then. The ILS-21, it's 109.5, which we have set on standby nav 1, and we'll tune that on the active for nav 2.
Descend flight level 240. Descend flight level 240. Caledonian 601.
Okay, there's our descent clearance, flight level 240. So the ILS, as I mentioned, 109.5, final approach track 207, aerodrome elevation 374 feet. Let's profile check at 4 DME of 1660. Down to an MDA of 550, and the missed approach is nice and easy, it's just straight ahead. Runway heading to 3,000 feet. Speed restrictions on the arrival, we have 280 knots below flight level 245, 220 knots below flight level 70, and then 180 knots on the approach. Also 250 knots below 10 of course. For the terrain, there's high terrain out to the northeast. MSA is 4,000 off the Lima India Sierra Lisboa VOR, which we'll tune once we are given radar vectors. Weather, it's not a particularly nice morning in Lisbon. There's been rain passing through the area all morning. There's some cloud around obviously. There's a 16 knot wind from the south, temperature's about 15 degrees, QNH 1007. For the landing on runway 21, plan to vacate to the left, probably off Hotel Sierra. We have to use manual braking, manual spoilers. I have to remind myself to do that, obviously not very used to doing that. Alternate day is Faro. Interestingly, the BAC 111 seems to be significantly underburning on fuel. I had a look online, it looks like the real world BAC 111 burns roughly 2,500 kilograms an hour. We've only been burning roughly 1,400, which means we'll be arriving with tons of fuel, literally, on top of what we need for a diversion. Currently around 7 tons, so we'll be well over 6 tons for the arrival. Which actually means, in theory, we could even go all the way back to Gatwick. A little bit silly, really. Anyway, now cleared for the descent, so descending flight level 240. Move that speed bug up to 280 knots, and we'll descend at 280 knots just to make sure we don't miss the restriction at flight level 245. So currently 30 miles to run to the Fatima VOR, which means we have roughly 90 miles for the descent currently. Just coming up on 26,000 feet, which means we need over 100 miles. So we are higher on the profile, but it's pretty easy to correct in the BAC 111. It's a very draggy aircraft, so no concerns there. We've got plenty of time to sort everything out.
Caledonian 601, you are 88 miles northeast, turn left heading 170, expect vector ILS, runway 21, approach 7638, you are 123 miles northeast, turn left heading 195, descend and maintain flight level 300, expect vector ILS, runway 21, approach Mayan Air 1887, turn left heading 025, resume on navigation, climb and maintain flight level 250. ALM 1695, you are 44 miles northeast, turn left heading 180, descend and maintain flight level 3.
Says 1 to go, we'll reduce the descent rate.
ILS, runway 21, approach. Turn left heading 170, expect vectors ILS, runway 21, approach, Caledonian 601.
And we are vectored for the ILS-21, which is great, that's what we wanted. So we can tune up the Lisboa VOR. That'll give us a better idea of our distance to run. Hopefully we'll get another descent momentarily.
Caledonian 601, descend altitude 16,000. Descend altitude 16,000. Caledonian 601.
So clear down to 16,000 now.
Caledonian 601, turn right heading 205. Turn right heading 205, Caledonian 601.
So passing through 23,000 feet. 92 miles that we need. We've got 74.
Ryanair,
So we're about 20 miles short of what we need for the descent at the moment. But again, not really a concern.
1695, descend flight level 267,638, turn right heading 225. Climb and maintain flight level 350, Ryanair 1887. Descend altitude 16,7638.
Speed just creeping up there, so we'll come back on the thrust. Again, with that 280 knot restriction, we don't want to let the speed get too high.
Air France 1624, you are 109 miles northeast, turn right heading 250, descend flight level.
We do have this cloud layer below us as well. The temperature currently around -5 degrees, so we'll see how we go when we get to the cloud tops, but it may be that we need to put the engine anti-ice on. It's coming up from 20,000 feet, the seatbelt signs can go on. And we are clear down to an altitude now, so we'll set the altimeter. QNH 1007, according to Sky Vector. I'm going to tune the tower for later on. That'll be one less job to do later, and make life a little bit easier for us. We can carry out the descent checklist. So descent checklist, APU, start. So the APU should fire up and start running. No smoking and seatbelt signs are on. Booster pumps are all on. Crossfeed valve is closed. And the approach speed 145 is set. See descent checklist complete. Currently about 10 miles shy now of what we need for the descent, so we are trending back onto the profile. And coming up on 1 to go, again we'll ease up on the descent rate. And of course, as a result, we'll have to come up on the thrust again. That's why I enjoy this kind of flying, it's so much more manual, and it really keeps you busy. You have to keep a really good scan rate up. I'd say hats off to people that actually used to fly these types of machines, especially in dodgy weather and complicated approaches. There's a lot of work going on, albeit there are two of you, that does help. And of course to some degree you get used to it, but certainly quite demanding task. Again, hopefully we'll get another descent clearance from air traffic.
Lisbon, control to Robot 1155, exceeding by level 18 for altitude 16,000. Caledonian 601, descend altitude 8,000. Robot 1155, Lisbon, control Roger, UNH 1007. Descend and maintain altitude 8,000. Caledonian 601.
So down to 8,000 feet now. So the next speed restriction we need to worry about is 250 knots below 10,000. So we'll start slowing down around 12,000 feet. And again, just keeping an eye out on this cloud layer. Temperature's about 5 degrees outside now, so we might be okay. Showing about 50 miles to run now to Lisbon. We need about 56 miles, so looking good now on the profile. We'll get a better idea as well once we're able to tune the ILS. And we'll set our bug now for 250 knots. Come all the way back on the thrust. And we'll come back to 500 feet a minute on the descent rate. Speed coming back nicely. See if we can maintain 1500 feet a minute. We're doing that now. Actually looking pretty good on the profile now. So we'll leave the descent rate at 1500 feet a minute. Temperature almost up to 10 degrees now. Coming up on 10,000 feet so the landing lights can go on. And we'll cycle the seatbelt signs. Speed's looking good. Now we can set the final approach track now for the ILS, that's 207.
Air France 1624, you are 85 miles north, turn left heading 190, descend flight level 240, expect vectors ILS, runway 21, approach. Turn left heading 190, descend flight level 240, expect vectors ILS, runway 21, approach. Air France 1624, Europa 1155, descend and maintain altitude 4000. Descend altitude 4000, Europa 1155.
And coming up on 1 to go.
Caledonian 601, turn left heading 170, descend and maintain altitude 8000. Turn left heading 170, descend and maintain altitude 8000. Caledonian 601. Lisbon control American Pacific 74.
So back off the ILS onto a heading of 170 by the looks of it.
American Pacific 74, Lisbon control Roger, UNH 1007. Caledonian 601, turn right heading 205. Turn right heading 205, Caledonian 601.
Just coming back up on the thrust a little to maintain the speed. Back towards a heading of 205 now. Not sure whether we'll get further descent clearance here or he's going to level us off momentarily. Looking like he's probably expecting us to level off, so we'll do just that. So maintaining 8,000 feet as instructed.
Air France 1624, turn right heading 220. Turn right heading 220, Air France 1624.
8,000 feet, 34 miles to run, so we are just a touch low, only by a couple of miles. And obviously he's holding us up here at 8,000 feet, so we'll end up probably trending high again. Should be picking up the ILS fairly soon.
16,000, Caledonian 601, turn right heading 265. Descent maintained altitude 16,000, Air France 1624, turn right heading 265, Caledonian 601.
So coming around to the right now, presumably onto our intercept for the localizer. And we're above 10 degrees on the temperature now, so icing not a concern when we descend through the cloud layer.
Resume on navigation. Caledonian 601, descend altitude 4,000. Descend and maintain altitude 4,000, Caledonian 601.
Okay, down to 4,000, that is the intercept altitude for the ILS. It's also the MSA.
Caledonian 601, turn right heading 290. Turn right heading 290, Caledonian 601.
Okay, further right, that's actually quite a sharp intercept angle, hopefully it'll bring us back to the left again. We're roughly on profile, but we're obviously tracking pretty much abeam the airport, we're not tracking towards it, so we'll keep a fairly low rate of descent for now. And speed back to 220 knots below 7,000.
Caledonian 601, please expedite your descent to altitude 4,000. 7638, turn left heading 195.
Realistically, you should be able to give them 500 feet a minute descent and they should be happy, but apparently he's not.
Turn left heading 205, descend and maintain altitude 4,000, cleared ILS.
So we'll go 1,000 feet a minute descent. Speed should still be okay, we don't need any speed break. There's 7,000 feet. Speed's good.
Turn right heading 225. Turn right heading 225, 7638.
And the APU is up and running. Put the air conditioning on the APU shortly.
Turn right heading 265. Turn right heading 265.
So we should be picking up the ILS now, we'll try tuning that. Not just yet it seems. We're below 240 knots now, so we can take some flaps whenever we like. But we're still a little bit far out at the moment to be thinking about that really. As I say, hopefully he's going to give us another turn to the left sometime soon.
Caledonian 601, you are 27 miles northeast, turn left, heading 225, descend altitude 4,000, cleared ILS, runway 21, approach, maintain altitude 4,000, visual established on the localizer. Contact Lisbon Tower on 118.5, 7638, turn right, heading 295, Europa 1155, turn right, heading 265. Turn left heading 225, descend and maintain altitude 4,000, cleared ILS, runway 21, approach, maintain altitude 4,000, until established. Tower on 118.5, Caledonian 601.
Okay, so it's given us a turn to heading of 225. It's actually a pretty shallow intercept though, so we'll sharpen that up a little bit.
Turn right heading 295, 7638. 7638. Descend altitude 4,000.
There's the ILS now, 25 miles to run, so we are pretty low as I mentioned. Yeah, we just sharpened up the intercept a little bit, otherwise I think we're going to be pretty tight in getting onto the localizer before we get onto the glide slope. The RMI is currently showing 215, we're looking for about 207. And what we'll do, we'll fly the aircraft onto the ILS ourselves using heading initially. I found if we just straight away arm the glide slope mode on the autopilot, it'll do some pretty strange things. Once we're happy we're on the localizer, then we'll arm the mode. It's 5,000 feet, we can seat the cabin crew. So of course, as we're manually intercepting the localizer, we'll have to keep a close eye on it, make sure we don't shoot through it. To do that, we can just use the RMI needle.
You are 31 miles northeast, turn left, heading 235, descend and maintain altitude 4,000, cleared ILS, runway 21, approach, maintain altitude 4,000, visual established on the localizer. Contact Lisbon Tower on 118.5. Turn left, heading 235, descend and maintain altitude 4,000, cleared ILS, runway 21, approach, maintain altitude 4,000 until established. Tower on 118.5, 7638.
And we need to change over to tower as well.
Lisbon Tower, Caledonian 601 is 21 miles northeast, inbound ILS, runway 21, approach. Caledonian 601, Lisbon Tower, continued approach, runway 21, UNH 1007. Continued runway 21, Caledonian 601.
So we're only cleared to continue at the moment, we're not cleared for the landing. QNH 1007 is set. Localizer should be coming in shortly, so we'll start a turn back onto a reasonable heading. Again, just to make sure we don't overshoot it. And here comes the localizer. We'll take a stage of flap now, we're below 240 knots. And we are now nicely aligned on the localizer, so we'll arm the autopilot. We'll keep an eye on it, if it does anything we're not expecting then we'll just cancel it and go back into heading. Come back to 180 knots momentarily. Does seem to be tracking the localizer. We're going to Warthog for the flight director. Coming back off the thrust to allow the speed to come back to 180 knots. And we should intercept the glide slope around 12 miles. So heading bug is set for the missed approach. So there's 180 knots, good on the speed. See the glide slope coming in now. Interestingly, the glide slopes don't quite match up on the HSI and the attitude indicator, but the aircraft is starting to descend, which is what we want to see. And the aircraft hunting around a little bit for the localizer there, but more or less doing an okay job at tracking it. So descending now to capture the glide slope. Quite an aggressive descent there, I have to say. It's looking a bit more reasonable now.
Lisbon Tower 7638 is 18 miles north, inbound ILS, runway 21, approach. 7638 Lisbon Tower, continued approach, runway 21, UNH 1007.
So we've got someone about 8 miles behind us.
7638. Lisbon Tower, Transavia 5952, ready for IFR departure, runway 21. Transavia 5952, cleared for takeoff, runway 21, service wind 282 at 15.
It sounds like we've got someone departing just ahead of us as well.
Takeoff, runway 21, Transavia 5952. Lisbon Tower, Europa 1155, altitude 1 miles north inbound ILS, runway 21, approach. Europa 115.
Take another stage of flap.
Continued runway 21, UNH 1007. Continued runway 21, Europa 1155.
As 8 miles, we'll take the gear down. There's 3 greens. As you can see, a lot of drag from the gear, so a lot of thrust needed to maintain speed. And we're below 180, so we can take flaps full now. The landing checklist, APU is running, APU air delivery and cross feeds go on. Air conditioning masters to APU. That just puts the air conditioning on the APU, it gives us more power for the go around. Start switches to relight. Hydraulic pumps, we turn the aux1 pump on. Gear is down, 3 greens. Altimeters are set. Brakes are checked. Flaps full. Landing lights are on, and we'll disengage the autopilot at minimum, which is 550. Can already just about make out the runway. Speed nicely coming back to approach speed.
01, cleared to land, runway 21.
We are cleared for the landing.
Cleared to land, runway 21, Caledonian 601.
We'll try and vacate as quickly as possible, as we do have that traffic behind us at roughly 8 miles. And from what I've read, the BAC 111 does have quite a strange landing technique. It sounds like you more or less keep the thrust on, and you don't really flare very much, you sort of fly the aircraft onto the runway. So we'll try and mimic that. Passing over the outer marker, altitude is checked.
7638, cleared to land, runway 21, follow the aircraft on final. Cleared to land, runway 21, 7638.
So someone behind us just cleared to land as well.
Short, runway 21, Turkish 1760.
Aircraft put us slightly to the left of the centre line there, it is correcting. We'll keep the autopilot in for now.
Transavia 5952, contact distance departure on 119.1. 119.1, Transavia 5952.
We are stable. Just slightly high now. So we'll disconnect the autopilot. The aircraft's a little bit strange to hand fly. And again, just drifting to the left of centre line here, so we'll correct. Back on profile.
Number 2, Europa 1155.
A little bit gusty. So we'll try and fly the aircraft onto the runway, not too much of a flare. Coming back off the power. There's touchdown. Spoilers up. Seems like the guy behind us had to go around, but that's not our fault. We won't take any reverse, as I want to roll through to Hotel Sierra. And we'll just let the aircraft roll through, no braking for the moment. Start to brake now. And vacating to the left. So the aircraft behind us did have to go around, but that's not our fault, that's just air traffic control lining them up too close together. Get rid of the spoilers.
601, contact ground on 118.5. Union 2118.5, Caledonian 601, good day. Lisbon ground, Caledonian 601, request taxi to stand. Caledonian 601, taxi to stand Golf 5, via taxiway Hotel Sierra, uniform 2, Golf 2, Alpha 2. Taxiing to stand Golf 5, via taxiway Hotel Sierra, uniform 2, Golf 2, Alpha 2, Caledonian 601.
Okay, I can't quite make out Golf 5 for the gate, but I have the taxiways on the chart. So we'll taxi at least into the vicinity, then we might cheat a little bit and turn on progressive taxi. We just vacated via Hotel Sierra, so we'll make a turn back on ourselves here onto Golf 2. We'll just go onto Golf 2 and then we'll start cleaning up the aircraft. Yeah, so that landing was a little bit firmer than I would have liked. I did follow the technique as best I could, going off the Just Flight instructions. It didn't help that the approach was slightly unstable there towards the end, although the aircraft, I have to say, did hand fly a little bit strangely. I did bring the thrust off just before touchdown, which may have been the reason that we had the firmer landing there. But personally, I feel like we needed a little bit more of a flare just to arrest that descent rate. So this is Golf 2. That'll have us crossing runway 03. Just straight across on Golf 2 and then that'll lead us onto Alpha 2. Not quite sure whether it'll be presumably right onto Alpha 2 and then we'll turn on the progressive taxi. So the after landing checklist, start switches can come off. Anti-ice is off, landing lights. Taxi, and we'll turn those off. Hydraulic pumps, we'll turn the AUX 1 pump off. Just about to cross the active runway, so we'll stop the checklist momentarily. It's clear on the runway, that traffic's just landed on runway 21. Clear on the other side as well. We'll turn on progressive taxi, so it is out to the right. Flaps can come up. Speed brakes are retracted. Pitot heat off. Autopilot is off. Tail trim set 0. And the flaps are checked up. So right, it looks like broadly down to the end of the terminal for Golf 5. The air bridge doing something rather interesting there to that EasyJet 320. And the same with the KLM 737. Yeah, so obviously I need a little bit of work on my landings in the BAC 111. Well, I have to say, hand flying the aircraft, it's a little bit strange. It didn't feel very right to me. Making my excuses again, I know, but yeah, it wasn't awfully responsive, felt a bit wallowy. Turn the flight director off. So the APU is running, APU generator is good. Pop that on the bus now. And I happen to know that if we get too close to the terminal here, it's probably going to tell us we've crashed the aircraft. So we'll stop well short of the gate just to avoid doing that. Taxi lights can come off. We'll just turn onto the direction of the stand and then we'll stop the aircraft. Kicking up a little bit of water here, as you can see. As I said, there's been a lot of rain passing through Lisbon this morning. A little bit of a shame about the weather. You don't really want to fly for 2 hours to find yourself in worse weather conditions than you departed from. So I'll bring the aircraft to a stop there. Park brake is on. Shutdown checklist, park brake is on. Windshield heat can go off. APU is checked on and we have it on the bus. Engine generator controls for trip. Start levers shut. Says cut off on number 1 and number 2. So the engines are off. Seatbelts can go off. Fuel boost pumps. I believe the APU feeds from the left, so we'll turn off the right hand side. LP valves closed. Beacon off. Taxi and landing lights are off. Nav lights, we didn't turn those on, they do cause a bit of a strange bug currently. And the APU generator, we'll leave that on, we'll turn around and we'll head back to Gatwick. So there you go guys, I do hope that you enjoyed our trip in the British Caledonian BAC 111 from London down to Lisbon. The BAC 111 is very much one of the types of aircraft that I really enjoy operating in the sim. Obviously it's rather old school technology, very hands-on to operate, and it does provide a significant challenge if you want to fly it single pilot. Anyway guys, once again I do hope that you enjoyed the video. I realised that this one was a little bit more niche, but I wanted to give the aircraft a go and I thought this would be a good opportunity to do so. As always, if you did enjoy what you saw, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. That really helps the channel to grow and of course gives me more impetus to keep producing content. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them down in the comments section below. I'll always do my best to reply. But for now, thanks very much and I'll see you all again soon.